call to order this meeting of the Santa Barbara Unified School District's Board of Education for Tuesday, August 22nd, 2017, and we are going to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Matsuoka.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Buenas tardes para el público presente. Tenemos los aparatos de interpretación para escuchar en español. Si así lo desea. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. And we do have headsets available for the hearing impaired at the side table if anybody in the audience needs them. And we are moving to item C5. This is announcement of closed session action, and there's no action out of closed session to report. There are a couple of items that we will take action on in open session, which brings us to the superintendent's report.
Good evening, everyone. Today is where we concluded our second day of school, and I got around to most of our sites yesterday, and it's kind of amazing how a school district reopens its doors. Kids are in classes, the hallways are empty. It's just a sign that we have a really veteran staff and just great schools. So it's fun to see our students back in the classrooms and teachers are teaching. Now the eclipse was pretty special. It was fairly overcast, but LaCumba Joanne Keynes bought 500 of the special glasses, and the kids actually got a glimpse of the eclipse for about 2 minutes. So it was very cool. Yeah, and it was recorded on KEYT. Did it run on TV at all? It did. All right. So we got some nice TV coverage. Tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Kim Hoy, who is our new coordinator of special programs, which is both VAPA and CTE. And Kim's been busy transitioning from Nordhoff High School in Ojai, California. And so we finally got her to come meet you as a school board, and she brought her whole family, which is great. So I'll have you introduce your family. So Kim comes to us from Nordhoff High, and she's done a lot of things in her career. She's primarily a dance instructor, but she's also done a lot of CTE work, and so she brings a wealth of experience. So welcome, Kim, and I invite you to come up to the podium and share some introductions with the board.
Thank you very much. I'm really honored to be here and have to tell you how special it is to have the opportunity to come and speak with you and be introduced. Before I tell you a bit about myself, I'll introduce my family. This is my husband, John. He is a history and theater educator. He and I were hired at Nordhoff together in 1993. So our history goes long and deep in that wonderful community. And I was actually originally a student teacher in Santa Barbara. And during my time as a student teacher, student taught at Santa Barbara High and Santa Barbara Junior High, and actually met my husband at UC Santa Barbara, where I was an exiting student teacher and he was an incoming candidate to the program, and so that's how we got to know each other. So there's a longer version of that story, but I'll spare that for you. I also want to introduce my 3 kids. This is my son, Jonah. He's 15, along with his twin sister, Kelsey, and they are sophomores starting as of tomorrow morning at Nordhoff. And then my daughter, Kirsten, she's 18, and she'll be attending UC San Diego as a theater and dance major, and a product of Nordhoff as well. So we've been very blessed to have a long-term career there. My background, I'll tell you, I've had sort of multiple seasons. I started out there as a family life and psychology educator, ultimately moved into social sciences for a period of time and was a department chair, transitioned to be a very pregnant person in 1998-99, and got my master's degree during that time, and ultimately had a great opportunity to be a school counselor. There was a prior time where I thought I was going to be a marriage and family therapist, and I had a really easy transition to school counseling as a result. Did that for about 2.5 years, and lo and behold, got pregnant with twins, and was a stay-at-home mom for a period of 3 years, which I think were the most grounding, most important years for our family, certainly, in terms of really I think, giving me a really like whole child perspective. Then came back to Nordhoff and was asked if I would consider starting a dance program in a brand new building that was purchased by bond funds that had been established in our community, and had the pleasure of running the dance program there for the last 13 years. And meanwhile, had a parallel career. Dance teacher part of the day, school counselor. It was like I had like my little superhero cape on and was always wearing clothes where I could transition really quickly and go teach a class. And then an opportunity arose to become assistant principal over at Nordhoff as the lead for curriculum and instruction. And Ojai is small enough that there was no Sean or Raul in Ojai Unified, not until about 6 weeks ago, actually. So there were some significant issues in Ojai, including major declining enrollment, and it prevented some of the development of leadership. So it turns out principals and assistant principals were doing some of those district level responsibilities, including oversight over a grant called VC Innovates. So our district was part of a consortium grant, and fortunately received a wide amount of money to support 7 CTE pathways. So it gave me a very wonderful opportunity to be a classroom instructor, but then also to really learn everything I could about career technical education. So as you can imagine, being married to a theater educator, and my children have been involved in visual and performing arts. My son's been a graphic design student, and paints, plays music. I've had a very rich and engaging home life that really, I think, embraces both of those elements. I'm a big believer in the nexus between arts and CTE. I definitely believe that we need to empower our young artists who want to have careers. California is the entertainment capital of the world. We ought to be ready to help educate those kids. So I look forward to working with staff. I've been very blessed to get to know a number of people, and I'm definitely on the learning curve, so I'm grateful there's no test at the end of my time here with you this morning, or this afternoon, this evening. But anyhow, I'm really pleased to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity. I also want to just commend you on having a vision for a comprehensive K-12 arts focus in your VAPA plan. I think that's one of the major inspirational parts of why I was willing to come here. In tears in June when I said goodbye to the Ojai Unified School Board, one of the things I said was most motivating to me was a core belief in making the arts available for all students, and that comprehensive belief in visual arts and performing arts. I'm excited about what lies ahead and how I can be a voice for all of those arts. So thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, and I've already had the chance to see you in action, obviously, and been incredibly impressed, and that was just like the first week, right? Yes. So welcome, and hopefully, may the commute angel smile upon you.
Yes.
And we are really looking forward to your work in this district, too. It is incredibly important to all of us, and it just will make a huge difference to our kids to have great leadership in that role. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
And then one last thing, if you, the lights were changed out since the last board meeting. You notice it's really bright. It's all because we have performing arts people in the crowd tonight. But Ish, if you'll reach behind you, the 2 left ones, play with the dimmers. No, the ones on the left. Those are the front. Oh, nice. So these are LED bulbs which you can dim, whereas fluorescents it's on or off. And so the old ones that we had were fluorescents. These are bright. Like look at cabinet over there. It's just like they're gonna have to stay awake. But this is an example of the new technology in lighting is LED, and it makes a big difference. So it's really good.
Great.
All right. So
thank you. Board comments and correspondence. Thank you. Mr. Paredes Ulloa.
A couple things. One, I wanted to commend Mitch and his team for great teacher training the other day that I got to come to. It was really inspiring to see. How many do we have? 70 plus?
We had 70 plus in that room, yes.
70 plus new faculty and staff, teachers, counselors, paras. It was amazing to see them all come on and start with us fresh, whether in their career or just in Santa Barbara. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about these instructors, hopefully all good things, and just seeing where they help take our district in the very near future.
Thank you. Ms. Capps.
Yeah, after the article was written on the Hidden Valley, I heard from a lot of folks who are active in the food world here in the county, and I know that the stakeholder process will happen eventually, but I just got to receive some interesting correspondence, a lot of enthusiasm, so a lot of interest.
Great. All right, let's move ahead then to item C8. This is public comment on non-agenda matters within jurisdiction of the Board of Education. Dr. Reed.
Yes, and we have Veronica Gallardo. Come on down.
Gallardo.
You can say it like yard.
Gallardo.
Yes, got it.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board, President Parker, Mr. Matsuoka, Mr. Rickman, and Mr. Tarina. Well, I am a proud Santa Barbara Unified School teacher, but I am here to address you on behalf of Santa Barbara City College. I am the trustee for Area 3. By coincidence, Area 3 runs through the east side, downtown, and the west side. So I get to interact and serve and represent your families from Cleveland, Adelante, Franklin, Santa Barbara Junior High, Santa Barbara High School, Roosevelt, some of Monroe, and McKinley, and of course our city college. Last year, in January, the board created a K-12 liaison position, which I am the representative for that. Given our new superintendent, both Dr. Bibi and Mr. Matsuoka, giving them some time to get things going, we didn't do much with that position. I did have an opportunity to meet with Ms. Parker this summer. And so really I'm just here today to introduce myself, to let you know that City College has a vested interest in the future of our local students. Our board goal from last year included our promise students. In fact, I was just at Santa Barbara City College because some of our Santa Barbara High students are taking a dual enrollment course, and I was at the bookstore. And there in front of me were some of our promise students. So that handoff from Santa Barbara Unified from our secondary to SBCC is extremely important. It is something that our whole community is behind. I'm sure you've gotten wind of our promise program. We didn't get to meet as a joint board last year, and so I think that that is something that we hope we can get on somebody's books so that we can meet and just talk about the future of what our the potential for Santa Barbara City College and serving our community. I know we have Mr. Ulloa, who is also an employee of Santa Barbara City College. I think that the neat thing in that is that Santa Barbara is small enough where we can have these conversations, and we often say in education that kids are an extension of their families. Well, as board members, we're extensions of our communities, and we interface with each other a lot. So I think that we can capitalize on our small town and the fact that we can get things going. So I look forward to working with all of you, and thank you for the opportunity to address you. And please feel free to reach out should you have any thoughts or questions or any new bright ideas so how we can make this seamless transition for our students better. And really, we're talking TK 14. So that's really the big vision we have here in the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gallardo.
Can I ask, I guess it would be Ms. Parker, what's been the history of joint board meetings with city councilors?
You know, we only actually started them, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago, something like that. It was something that it's hard, and it's hard because it's a three-way thing with Carpentry Unified, because those are the two feeder school districts into SBCC, but they've been great. And really super practical, talking about, really nitty-gritty stuff with our students. And, the majority of our students are either at City College or going to City College, so it's an incredibly important relationship. And typically it's been about 1 year to 18 months or so. But you're right, with the changeover to the new superintendent for City College, we have not had that meeting, I don't think. So it's time, for sure, yeah.
Yeah,
What night are your board meetings?
We are this Thursday. So you guys are
They're
Tuesday and we're
Thursdays.
Thursday.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, Mr. Beebe's going to be at the Peabody Stadium groundbreaking tomorrow, so I will mention to him that we should start working on a joint board meeting.
Yeah, and they've
That'd be
typically
great.
been in the afternoon and held at City College, and
Yeah.
and Carpinteria and Santa Barbara make,
Okay.
an effort to come together.
Yes, we host, we have good food because we have an amazing culinary department.
Yeah.
So that should entice you, and the breathtaking view. So can't beat that.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank
good.
you.
So we'll look forward to seeing you.
Yeah.
Okay, that pulls us to the consent agenda. And are there any items that need to be pulled? Ms. Sims-Moten?
Yes, item 6.
Okay, we will pull D6 and talk about that at the end of the meeting. Any others? Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item D6?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Sims-Moten and seconded by Mr. Paredes Ulloa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that passes unanimously, minus D6. Okay, action. First up is item E1. This is a board action on petition for readmission of an expelled student in case number 2016-17-18.
So in the case of 2016-17-18, I move to accept the reentry from expulsion with enforcement suspended for 1 school year ended on June 2017.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Reed and seconded by Ms. Sims-Moten. All those in favor?
Aye.
Passed unanimously. Then E2, board action on petition for readmission of an expelled student. This is case number 2016-17-41.
So in the case of 2016-17-41, I move to accept the reentry from the expulsion with enforcement suspended for 1 school year ended on June 2017.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. We're now moving on to E3. This is board action on student discipline. This is case number 2016-17-60.
So in the case of 2016-17-60, I move to accept the stipulated agreement for full expulsion for 1 school year, which ends June 2018.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. And then E4, board action on student discipline, case number 2016-17-62.
So in the case of 2016-17-62, I move to accept the stipulated agreement for expulsion with enforcement suspended for 1 school year, which ends June 2018.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. E5, board action on student discipline, case number 2016-17-64.
So in the case of 2016-17-64, I move to accept the stipulated agreement for expulsion with enforcement suspended for 1 school year, which ends June 2018.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Aye. And that passes 4-1 with Ms. Capps opposing. We're at item E6. This is approval of provisional internship permits, and that's Mr. Torina.
Thank you, President Parker, board members, and cabinet. I bring before you a agenda item regarding our PIP, which is a provisional internship permit. It allows an employing agency to fill an immediate staffing need by hiring an individual who has not yet met the requirements for a credential. What the program requires, or what the permit requires, is that the applicant must have a minimum of 18 semester units in the subject area, or in the case of a multi-subject area, the 18 units is spread across 4 areas. The board is required to approve the agreement to employ these teachers on the provisional internship permit, and the recommendation is that the board approve the action item. There are a list of the 5 teachers who we have currently employed under a PIP.
Any questions about those? If not, can I get a motion to approve these provisional internship permits?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Paredes Ulloa and seconded by Ms. Sims-Moten. All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
And E7, ratification of amendment to employment agreements for 5 assistant superintendents and the chief educational technology officer. Mr. Matsuoka.
So included in the board agenda is it's just a 1-page amendment to an original employment contract. I included Dr. Ramirez just as a point of reference. They were identical, it would have been all 5 of them. And so this is an update to their contracts. So the original contracts were for 2 years, and these are 2 years extensions.
And I've noticed you don't put any fiscal impact down because there's no changes in salary based in that's part of the contract.
Right. They're on a salary schedule, and that's all captured in multi-year projections.
Any questions about these? I need a motion to to ratify these amendments.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Reed and seconded by Ms. Sims-Moten to ratify the amendments to the employment agreements for 5 assistant superintendents and the chief educational technology officer. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you. And now we're at E8. This is Mr. Tay. Adoption of Resolution 2017-18-02, approving the joint use agreement with the City of Santa Barbara Police Department for 915 East Montecito Street.
Thank you very much. This item was brought to you on August 8th, and there was some confusion whether there was a termination clause. And there is a termination clause on page 3, item 9, and it's a 60-day written notice. So I'm asking that you approve the agreement with the Santa Barbara City Police Department.
Mr. Paredes Ulloa.
This is me being nitpicky, little typo. Item 12, point A and B, fullest is misspelled.
Yes, I think they mentioned that before, and we have not fixed that because everybody has already signed it. So what I was thinking, what we should do is just print this page out, correct it, print the page out. So I'll make sure Alma does that. It's misspelled twice. Sorry.
Contract with the school district, Meg.
Well, actually, I'm not going to tell you who really wrote the contract.
All right. And did you guys talk about this? I was not at the last meeting. Did you talk about it at the last meeting?
Yes,
So
we did.
great. Awesome. We need a motion to adopt this resolution.
So moved.
Can I second it?
Moved by Ms. Sims-Moten and seconded by Dr. Reed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It passes unanimously. And then also, Mr. Tay, E9, approval of the initial contribution to the irrevocable trust.
Yes, I'm very excited and pleased to bring this to you. As you may know, or you will know more about this when we have an actuarial study, but we have an actuarial study that determines what our liability is for our other post-employment benefits. And right now, as of 2015, we have to do this every 2 years. And our last actuarial study was as of June 30th, 2015. At that time, we have a $17 million liability, and the board made a decision to open an irrevocable trust, and to fund that trust each year, so it offsets the liability. So we have a $17 million liability. If we add $1 million as an asset, we now have a $16 million issue instead of a $17 million issue. So this is, we felt this was a large enough PO to bring to you for permission to actually make this move and to answer any questions about where this money is coming from, which I can explain, and also, so it brings a little more attention to it than just putting it on the PO list in the consent item. So we had 2 retirements. One was 2012 and one was 2014. There were 5-year retirements. Incentives.
Because you're missing a word there, Mr. Tay. It's like,
Sorry.
wow, only 2 people retired.
So they were retirement incentives, and there were 5 years, 5 payments of about $570,000 or something, close to that. And the 2012 one has dropped off. We've made our final payment back on July 2016. And so the board decided that with that money, we would still keep it in the budget and fund this irrevocable trust. So that's about $573,000. The other 500 is, you may remember, probably one of your first board meetings, that we had an audit finding in Fund 90 that it wasn't reconciled. We'd had that on our account for a long time. And as we suspected, we have reconciled that account since last April. And as suspected, we have been overfunding our OPEB, and the OPEB comes out on the district side every payroll. So it's about 1% of the total payroll, and that automatically moves into Fund 90. Well, we suspected that once we get this reconciled, that we would have that overfunding of the OPEB in Fund 90. So Mr. Matsuoka and I decided that we would take, or proposed that we would take $500,000 of that Fund 90 and move it into this irrevocable trust also. We feel that this was an OPEB contribution out of the all the funds. It comes from all the funds in the district, and then it goes into the Fund 90. So we have about $1.5 million still sitting out there to possibly fund more of the irrevocable trust to offset that $17 million. I know that's a lot, and you'll hear more about the actuarial because we have to do one as of June 30th, 2017. It takes us about 8 months to do it. Then we will present that to the board.
Mrs.
Bowden?
Thank you. I just had a comment because I think that first board meeting, some of the challenges with reconciliation was the fact that you didn't have the full staff, and so I noticed that you do have that, so that's evident of that needing to happen at that time. So I just wanted to recognize that as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? My question, I guess, my question is that, you talk about how in 2015, the board at the time determined that it was in the best interest of the district to open an irrevocable trust. I think it would be helpful for the public to understand why. I mean, obviously, this is money that, you could just spend it right now. And instead, we're putting it aside to save for these long-term obligations. Can you talk a little bit about why it's in the best interest of the district to do that?
Absolutely. First of all, it offsets the liability. That's the number one thing, so our balance sheet gets more in balance. The second one is we have a greater flexibility with our investment. If we left it at the county treasurer, we would be getting less than 1%. So now it will accrue larger interest because we will be able to invest it. By funding into a trust, we get a higher discount rate that can be used as actuarial evaluation. So that will help us offset, again, the liability in our actuarial study. The flexibility funding policy allows the district to deposit as needed, and we can start and stop whenever we want to. We can also, if times got really rough, we could take the money from the irrevocable trust to pay the OPEB amount, and that's another positive. But the one that really affects me and Joanna Bose, who's in the audience, is our ratings. They ask us, the bond ratings, they ask me every single time, what are you doing about your OPEB liability? What are you doing about your OPEB? Last year I could say we opened a trust, and now this year we can say we just funded it for $1,073,000. So that will help keep our ratings up there, and that's important. So that's some of the pros. Now the con, I only see really two cons, and that is that you can't just take it and use it for anything. But because you can't, that makes it really really positive in bond ratings because they know you can't just take it out for anything. And then the second is the market volatility. So we are investing it, so could go up, could go down. Yeah. So those are the pros and cons.
I think I need to follow up with asking about how it's being invested then. I assume it's being invested conservatively, but I would like to hear more about that.
You can only invest, and I'm going to do this out of memory, but you can only invest the amount that they used in the actuarial. So I'm going to make these numbers up. So let's say the actuarial is like based on a 3% growth for the actuarial, the liability. We can't go above that. So we're not going to be putting stuff in that's getting 25% and then the next day it bottoms out. So there's checks and balances because it is school district money. So, and I would have to go back and refresh my memory on that. So if you need more information, I can get that.
I think in the long run, given how, unfortunately, there have been some public entities that have invested too riskily and lost money, that it would be good just for us to, whenever that kind of thing is happening, because typically it doesn't, that we just get info about where it ends up, so that if anybody has concerns, they can raise them directly. Great. And when we have higher bond ratings, we save taxpayers lots of money.
That's correct.
Okay, any other questions about it? I know you're making Mr. Herron very, very happy right now.
He emailed me.
Yeah, he emailed us all, yes.
I miss Mr. Herron.
He did. All right, I do need action on this. This is the approval of initial contribution to the irrevocable trust.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Capps and seconded by Mr. Paredes Ulloa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that passed unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, with the board's permission, we are now moving to our report discussion agenda, and so we will take a 5-minute break. To move us back into our report discussion agenda, beginning with item F1. And this is a Tech Equity Summer 2017 update. Mr. Rickman.
While he's queuing up, for the new board and the new superintendent, I still think new, and the opening of school, watching the deployment of iPads it's been pretty seamless out there. And I would say for Mr. Rickman and for Ms. Parker, who watched the pilot for 5 years, to watch it launch this week was amazing. So we wanted to give the board a chance to see this report because in a way, Todd's been presenting this to the staffs across the district for the last 3 months. So, and at your desk is an example. So,
no, it is not for you to take home. Good evening, Mr. Matsoko, President Parker, board members. Before I start, I want to repeat something that I say all the time, and I just think it's important to repeat every time I talk about this issue. And this is really not a technology initiative as much as it's an educational equity initiative. And that's the way we've approached it from the beginning. So what I'm going to do tonight is just basically go over with you the work that has been done over the summer, a little bit about this deployment, and where we go from here. So have you guys figured them out yet?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
the back, flips. Ms. Sims-Moten got an A+. So let me talk to you, while you guys are playing around with that, I might as well talk about this case. So what you'll notice is actually, one of the things we talked about the iPad was the form factor, that it's a tablet, allows you to do a lot. So this case, you can pull that keyboard right off. So if you pick it up, you just yank the keyboard off and it just remains a tablet. The iPad itself actually powers the keyboard, so we don't have to charge keyboard batteries. It's also automatically connects, so we don't have to worry about Bluetooth and other problems that teachers might encounter in the classroom. So
I'm having moments of like touch versus where I touch, like, wait.
You know what I do frequently on those is I find myself trying to use the trackpad that doesn't exist. Yeah. Okay, so infrastructure. Let me give you a little brief update about the infrastructure. So Ms. Parker will remember that when we initially rolled out Apple TVs, we had all sorts of problems with the mirroring. We did all sorts of work to our network to get that issue improved, and we improved it somewhat, but it was never great. We recently deployed this summer about 700 new Apple TVs, and we have not had a single complaint about mirroring. It seems to be working great, which is a huge win, especially to teachers who have been really frustrated by that technology, not because they can't depend on it. And so this seems to completely have fixed the problem. The Apple TVs are going in conference room mode, which means it's without the apps and the movie posters to distract students. And we ask that if teachers want to use the apps, all they have to do is put in a tech ticket, and we can put the apps back on for them. We also, when we first deployed wireless, we did what was called a coverage model, and I don't think I've talked about this with the board. We put access points in every other classroom, and sometimes not even that, believing that we just needed to get this was before my time. The belief during that time was you just need to get a signal to a device, and that was good enough. But now that we have such saturation of devices, we really need an access point in every room. So our facilities department did a fabulous job of filling in those gaps where we've placed an access point in almost every single classroom. That project should be finished in October with the remaining schools, but it should take care of any lack of wireless coverage or density issues we have with devices, lots of devices in a classroom. So we don't have 60 devices attaching to one AP. We only have a classroom full. And you can interrupt me and ask questions if you want. Our mobile device manager is run by a company called Jamf. We were hosting that on site, but as we grew, we decided to move that off site to the cloud. That allows us to grow more quickly, allows us to be more nimble when we add devices. So that was completed over the summer. This is a little complicated. I'm gonna go through it really quickly. We're in the process of installing 17 caching servers, and how I describe a caching server is you're making a cake and realize you don't have an egg. So you run over to your neighbor's house and ask to borrow an egg. Your neighbor gives you the egg because they already went to the store. They did the tough work, right? They went to the store, they gave you an egg. That's how a caching server works. When a student or a teacher goes to download an app, instead of going all the way out on the internet to Apple servers across the world, we actually cache that app on campus or one of our sites. As long as somebody's gone to the store and gotten the egg already, it's there. So it allows students and teachers to download things much more quickly. So again, our goal is to provide a greatest experience for both our students and our teachers to try to eliminate frustration so the technology gets out of the room. One of my goals is when we walk into a classroom, we're never surprised when we see pencils. We never go, oh my gosh, these kids have pencils. I really want to get to the point where we don't feel that way about technology. During PD Day, and I've added a couple slides to my presentation since I posted online, and I'll update it for the board. During PD Day, we trained almost all of our teachers in the use of an app called Apple Classroom, which allows the teachers to granularly manage the apps or manage the devices in their classrooms. They can lock screens, they can view what students are doing on screens, they can put students in groups, they can lock them into apps, they can send them to websites. So it really gives the power to the teacher to control those devices. And like I said, just lock the screens if they want to just have the students put them away. Yeah.
So as far as the user friendliness of doing something like that, because I imagine if you're in a classroom with 28 to 35 students and you've got, let's say, 7 groups going on at once, it could be a little time consuming to lock in that many groups. I mean, is it pretty relatively easy?
It's really easy, and I would be happy to have our tech coaches do a presentation on Apple Classroom for you guys. And there's a video on our tech equity page about how it works so you can see it. Yeah, it's like a select all and lock. That's how quickly it is.
Okay.
Or select this entire group and lock. So it's really quick. Yeah. So deployment. So we're in the midst of deploying. We've been deploying for 2 days, and my goal in our deployment was to reduce stress for teachers and site staffs, to take as much burden off site staffs as possible, and to limit the loss of instructional time. To that end, what we've been doing the entire summer is my staff has been hunkered down in the basement, and they have been logging in to every iPad by hand. So the process is this is just, there's many steps to the process. The process that we're doing that I had to talk them into was we log into the iPad, log into wireless, log into their managed Apple ID, change their managed Apple ID password so it matches all their other passwords. And that's just kind of the last step of things. But my goal was to deliver devices to students that were ready to go, so teachers didn't have to worry about possible password issues and things that would come up. So we've been able to do that. We've had some glitches here and there, but it's been largely successful. I don't know if we can keep this up year after year, and I don't think we'll have to as students and teachers begin to become familiar with the devices, but that's what we've done this year. So when a student gets an iPad, they get a letter that has some information about how to care for the iPad, where to go for help, and what their new username and password is. Once they look at that letter, they get their iPad, and unlike yours, which is totally unlocked, their iPad only has one app on it that we've created. It's a webinar app about digital citizenship. So the student has to go through the digital citizenship webinar that was created by our tech coaches with the help of our librarians. And they just can't fudge it, they just can't guess. They have to actually answer the questions correctly. And once they do that and they hit submit, and this is kind of what it looks like, and when they hit submit, what eventually happens is all of their apps magically become available for them to use. So they don't have full access to the iPad until they've completed that webinar. We felt it was important to give some basic information about digital citizenship and online safety prior to setting the kids loose on them, and that's something we're going to continue to do and improve on. We're going to be adopting the Common Sense Media curriculum, and librarians and tech coaches will be helping push that out.
Can I have you pause there for a second?
Yes,
Because
ma'am.
first, I just want to say, in many ways, I'm just so appreciative that because of the iPads, that we're really finding this space. Because these students, everybody needed this, they all need this, and it's been pretty ad hoc, whether or not it's been happening or not happening, and depending on, which librarian or which teacher is doing what. And so I really appreciate, because I actually feel like this needs to be part of a core curriculum in the 21st century.
Absolutely.
And so I think that this is really, really important. I also want to note, when you were talking about responsibility and care, something that came up over the summer in terms of the damage to textbooks, and noting that we needed to update our board policy, that we're missing some language on that. And so I'm hoping that comes forward soon. I know that you've been moving forward as if the language in the board policy have been changed around willful damage, because accidents may happen. When accidents happen, essentially the district is responsible.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, and so we refunded all the money that had been, any funds that had been paid for insurance so far. That money's already been refunded. We talked about it in cabinet, and we're going to be bringing something forward.
Great.
Yeah. So that gives me to instruction. And when I did this presentation for the principals, I pointed out that, this really is about instruction. People have tried to make it about technology. It's about instruction. And so our work is really just beginning. All of this work was to get to a place in my mind where now we can really start. I read an interesting book over the summer called The Innovator's Mindset by George Couros, and I have extra copies if any of the board members are interested. He's a great follow on Twitter, so if you're on Twitter and are interested in following really interesting people that have a lot to say about education, he's one of them. And one of the things he does is he talks about Blockbuster. And I was joking, my kids will never know the struggle. They'll never understand trying to go to Blockbuster, panic that the movie that you want is not going to be there, right? Driving that way, find it's not there, so you post somebody at the check-in counter, remember, and you're like, watch for it to come in, right? Our kids will never know.
Some of us are laughing.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about Blockbuster, I did a little research about it. They employed 58,500 people at one point in time at their height. They had over 9,100 stores, and I had to look this up to compare it because I was like, I have no idea what that even means. But Wendy's restaurants, which feels like they're everywhere, has a little over 6,000 worldwide. So Blockbuster was huge. In 2000, Reed Hastings, the founder of Netflix, approached Blockbuster with an offer to sell his company for $50 million. They declined. They said, no, we don't think this is going anywhere. We're not interested. Netflix's current value is $70 billion. And the reason he brings this up is he talks about, and I think that we really need to consider this as educators, that if we continue to do the same thing as a school district that's been done forever, and the world around us innovates and changes, our families are either going to find someplace that does it better, or they're going to create someplace that does it better. And so it's incumbent on us to innovate and change to meet the needs of our customers, which are our families and our students. And so that's the work that we must embark on now. One of the quotes from the book that I really liked was, we cannot have our schools look the way they always have, but just in digital format. We need to do more than that. And I want to stop by saying, I have always said that we have the most fabulous teachers I've ever been around. I come from a family of teachers. I know what great instruction looks like, and we have incredible teachers who already are innovating every day in their classroom. We just need to continue to support and give them the tools they need to do that. This was an interesting graphic, and I put it in because it kind of speaks to where we are and where I would like us to go. So generally, using technologies has been about an app or about a program. And it says wrong answers. I wouldn't say they're wrong answers. It's just where people are, and that's okay. We need to continue to move forward. And the truth is that we need to move a person from A to B, help a teacher go from A to B, and it doesn't have to be my A to B, it can be their A to B, right? We just need people to take steps forward. And so it's not going to be about making prezzies or creating blogs or doing any of that thing anymore. It's about these real 21st century skills that we need people to go into the workplace with, right? To be thinkers, to know the right questions to ask, how to solve problems, and that's what we're trying to do. I put the link up to our webpage because it's filled with a lot of great information, including that video that I mentioned about how the Apple Classroom works. And so I'd be happy to take your questions at this time. Yeah.
Dr. Reed?
Thank you. I really appreciated this presentation, and I did appreciate this last graphic. It just really stuck with me. And the interesting point of, and I appreciate you also saying wrong answers. It's not necessarily wrong answers. It's where we were historically or where we're going. And what I notice in all of these right answers is really about transformative education, because it's really about seeking out answers, taking action steps, making a difference. So really, that this is really an opportunity for students to just really blossom into a whole new way of thinking and taking on an action plan that they can make a difference. So I think this is a great opportunity for all of our students in the district, and I'm glad that we're at the level we are. We got to this point. It's nice to be on this road and this journey going forward. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I guess I would love to have a better understanding, which I don't currently have with my son at this age, but just how much of homework is tied to technology now? I hear from friends that it's the majority. Would you?
I wouldn't say it was the majority, and I would say it completely depends on the teacher's journey with technology at this point in time.
Sure.
I think you're going to see it grow because more and more of our teaching and learning resources are online. In fact, all of the textbooks all the instructional materials we just purchased all have an online component. So I would be disappointed if everything was done online. I mean, technology has a place, but it is not a panacea for everything. It should be used when it's the right tool, and that's kind of what we need to work on. So it depends, that's a long way to say it depends on the teacher.
Sure.
Yeah.
So do we provide guidelines of that balance? Because I do think that balance is really important. I mean, equity, I'm so glad you led with the point that this is really about equity, because this is sort of a have and have-nots unless we provide this service. But also, I think the other side of the coin is just an over-reliance potentially on technology. And I hear, again, from parents who have kids that are older than mine that they're on, they're working, but they're actually on Snapchat, and it's just sort of impossible to ever turn it off, right?
Yes, I have kids. I think you're describing my children. Were we talking about that at some point in time? It's going to continue to be a struggle. Our tech coaches are working to provide some of those guidelines. I think that that's something we could do a better job of, and we'll continue to work on it. And also, one of the things I've been very proud of our district and our board and our teachers is that I have said all along, we are not going to have all the answers because this is new. We are somewhat tip of the arrow. We're farther along than a lot of districts and not as far along as some. And so some of these things that we'll just have to deal with when we get to them. So I'm appreciative of you bringing that to my attention. The other thing it reminds me of is one of the things that we are lacking now that we need to improve on is some kind of training for teachers. I mean, it's training for parents. We need a parent education program around technology in a lot of ways. So many of our students have parents who are unable to get online to check on how they're doing in their classes, to get important information from the schools. And I've said this before, the more we move to technology, we enfranchise whole groups of people while at the same time disenfranchising other groups of people. And we have to be very wary of that and provide training and help for our families around that.
That's an important point. I mean, I could just say from planning my son's birthday party, the teacher gave me the list in our classroom, and not every parent has an email address, correct? It was probably about 4 or 5 didn't, and that was an important reminder for me of this big disconnect. But then also educating parents too on how pervasive technology is as well. I mean, I think probably the access is more important if you had to rate what the school should be trying to do, but all of it is very, very challenging.
Yes, it is.
Are there, just technologically, can apps like Snapchat be accessed on these
No,
schools?
so on those devices, they're all educational-based apps. If we find an app that is causing problems, we can take it off the device. For instance, messaging and all of that is disabled on those devices, which is really nice. That's kind of the granular control we have through our mobile device manager to be able to do that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I will collect those at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Rickman. And at this point, we will move to F2. This is Mr. Tay, discussion of opportunity of refunding general obligation bonds.
Thank you. So this is really good news. As you know, our community has supported this district with a lot of bond money recently, over $300 million since I've been at the district, which is about 9 years, which I can't believe. And because of that, we continually look for ways, and with Morgan Stanley and K&N, our partners, they help us look at some of our bonds that in our past bonds and say, hey, can we refinance or refund these bonds to get either take CABs, which are current appreciation bonds, or SIBs, which is current interest bonds. We can get the CABs off and refinance them into current interest bonds. It will save in the long run our taxpayers a great deal of money. So our team did that, and they looked at the 2007 and the 2010 bonds, and we came up with a scenario that you were looking at up here, and we have to kind of combine those two to get the best bang for our buck. And basically, the overall savings is $10.6 million over the life of the bonds, of savings to taxpayers. And we really take this very seriously. We ask a lot of our community, and we really want to make sure that we give back and try to do whatever we can to lessen the debt. So with that, the scenario you're seeing here is the elementary and the high school, and at the very bottom, this number right down, you scroll down a little bit, Brian, right down there is the 10.6, almost 10.6 million. That's an approximate amount of savings. And basically, we are alleviating or refinancing the cabs, which are, as our board knows, our previous board knew and went through it, where they are not the types of bonds that, the types of entity or the mechanism we want to use to do our bonds. So these will be converting the cabs into SIBs, and also it stays within the life of the bond. No more time is added to it, so it's the same life structure. So I know this is kind of confusing, and we do have Joanna Bose from KNN in the audience if I can't answer the questions, but I'm here to try and answer your questions.
Ms. Sims-Moton?
So is there like an example, like could you talk about maybe the most recent bond that, for instance, the Measure I and J, how does that relate to this?
It doesn't.
Okay, so these are different types of bonds.
These are different.
Okay.
Our bonds are 2016, Measure I and J are 2016. We're talking about 2010, November 2010, when we sold those bonds, and when we sold bonds in 2007.
But okay, so those 2007 bonds, but were they like a measure? I'm just trying to understand what you mean by that.
Measure 10 was Measure Q and R, and then 2007 was, I don't remember. Pardon me? Measures V?
No, those are the parcel taxes.
No, A and B are parcel taxes.
Right, so I'm wondering, was it a refinance of the 2000 Measure V? Or was it a sale from Measure V? What was between?
I would have to go back and, well, it's not on this document. I'll have to get back to you. I mean, if Dave Yonk was here, he probably could tell you.
I'm sure he would, yeah.
So I guess I'm just.
Who said that? Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
You're right about the 10, so 6, I believe it was that measure. I believe that.
So I guess I'm just trying to reconcile in terms of maturity. So we're refinancing. What does that mean?
So it would be like, let's do your house.
Okay.
Okay, so you have so much equity in your home, and you go, you know what, the rates are now, instead of the 7% I was making, or it was a longer loan, it was 30 years. So what I think we're going to do is I can get a better interest rate now, so I think I'm going to refinance my home, make it a lower rate, and get 15 years. You know, so the cabs put the principal payment and the interest payment further out. Nothing up front, and Joanna, jump in at any time. But the cabs, you didn't make any payments for a while, like maybe the first 10 years or something, and everything was pushed out, which is, it's more expensive that way. So we're going to try to get rid of as many cabs as we can to bring it in line, so we're making principal and interest payments every year.
So to get rid of the cabs, are you selling those? How are you getting rid of them?
We will refinance those cabs and make them into SIBs,
okay,
which are current interest bonds.
Okay.
Can I just ask us, how much do we have left in cabs? After, if you were able to do this, do we still have cabs that are lingering?
We still have cabs.
And is it a lot, or is it, you want to come to the mic?
One thing I want to say about that, the reason why we can do the 7 and the 10 together to get rid of some of those cabs is because of the way that it balances out. So we looked at refunding or refinancing more cabs, but we didn't have enough offset in 2007 to help that process along. I know, maybe you can explain that better than I.
When, in your different authorizations over the last 3 authorizations that you passed, there was an introduction of a security called a capital appreciation bond, which does not have a coupon on it. And it's called a 0 coupon. And you use those mainly in your 2010 election for a number of academic reasons, which we could discuss at another time. Most of the bonds that were sold, and many school districts sold them, were callable. Most bonds that you sell have a 10-year call. But most capital appreciation bonds that were sold, particularly in the time when all the California school districts sold them, let's say from 2001 to up to when AB 182 was passed about cabs, were non-callable. So you have a combination of all. You have cabs, you have capital appreciation bonds that are callable this year, 2017. Those are the ones that we're going to refund. Refund means you define that. We have the ability to call them away. That was something you paid for when you sold them. And we're going to get rid of the zeros and we're going to put a coupon on them. All right? That is going to reduce your debt service in the long term. I can explain that another time. You also have capital appreciation bonds that are capital appreciation bonds until a certain date, which is 2021, where they convert to they have an interest rate. Those are called convertible capital appreciation bonds, and then they become current interest bonds. We looked at refunding those as well, but it's not efficient to do that. So we have to wait longer to do that. Third, you do have some capital appreciation bonds that are non-callable. That has to be handled a completely different way. So like all school districts, you have all 3. What we're doing now is taking the first step in being able to rid yourself of callable bonds, which is you're fortunate you have them, which is going to be savings to the taxpayer. In combination, as Meg said, with some current interest bonds that are also callable to give you additional savings. It is complex. I apologize for that. So Meg can give you more detail. We have presentations. Perhaps she can circulate some of the pages that you can read them, and then if you develop questions. We went through this with former trustee Herron a long time, so we have a lot of material for you if you'd like. All right.
Another quick question I have, how does the taxpayer see the savings? Do they see it in lower yearly property taxes?
Tax bill is
or
less.
Or does it shorten it?
Yes, and in all fairness, I have to tell you that it's not a big number. I mean, if you can get $1, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's because bond issues are large and
Right.
Tax rates are, depending on which year you sold the bonds, either, at $30 or $60. So, but they see that in their annual tax bill.
Great. Well, this is great news, obviously,
Yeah.
so we look forward to that. I will say, we have a couple of older bonds, 95, Measure R, and 98, Measure I, that I would be curious at some point to see where they are in terms of payoff, because they might be getting,
Okay.
if it gets within 10 years, it gets kind of exciting. All right, thank you.
Thank you. So we'll be moving
yes.
forward. Thank you.
I think everybody's smiling up here. Okay, that brings us to the budget overview, item F3, Mr. Matsuoka and Mr. Tay.
So I will begin this, and then Mr. Tay will come back to the podium. We'll both answer questions. In conversation with the board and speaking with individual board members, I would say for the new board members, understanding a district budget it takes a while. And so as I think it was with Ms. Sims-Moden, I thought, okay, where do we start? And I thought, well, let's start with the biggest, big picture. And we never explained the SACS accounting code system. And, it just was embedded in the budget documents. And so we actually wanted to start at the very highest level And if you actually Google SACS, it takes you to the CDE website. I probably could have wandered around there for a couple hours because there's some really interesting district-to-district comparisons. I actually downloaded the spreadsheet of all unified districts and how we're funded. And we're not in the top of the list. We're not in the middle of the list. I'd say we're in the bottom about 1/3 as a K-12 funded district. So there's just a wealth of data. And what this data allows CDE to do is to compare all school districts' finances against averages, against each other. It's really interesting. And so here's a breakdown. So we just wanted to explain as we unpack the budget over the next 4 to 5 months so that when we get to the next budget adoption cycle, you just have a better framework in your head. And so the 1,000s through 7,000s is how expenditures are organized. You can see the categories. And we thought it would be helpful for you to see unrestricted, which is really our general fund, and then restricted. And by the way, I was a bit surprised at the restricted numbers, but again, we are still spending down some restricted monies that came to us, 2 to 3 years ago. Like this last week, the whole PD week, that was a lot of money that was saved and set aside. It was unrestricted. So I think the restricted will go down over the years, but you can see, Brian, if you'll go to the bottom, so our budget's $161 million. That's a big budget.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the breakdown unrestricted compared to restricted. And then if you'll go back up to the top, as you can see, our biggest expense is certificated salaries, which is our teacher workforce. It's anybody who requires a credential. So it's teachers, school psychologists, speech language pathologists, and all of your administrators have to have an administrative credential. And so, you just go down the list. I would say the one that has grown fairly recently is look at employee benefits. And, as Ms. Jate said last spring, all we can do is plan for it. We really can't change that because that's statutory by STRS and PERS. But I think it's important for everybody to see that number has climbed, and it's going to climb for a few more years. Someday in 2021, it will finally flatten out. The part where you see a lot of approvals coming before you is really the 4,000s and 5,000s. And 6,000s too, but honestly, that's really small because all of your building approvals are really in the bond program, and that's a whole separate budget. So realize that, as the board is presented with information and decisions, it's mostly it's a lot in the 4,000s and 5,000s, but I would say the LCAP expenditures, especially the supplemental funds, are really going to be back mostly in the 1,000s, because if we spend money on teachers and supported programs, it's going to be there. So there's a big overview. It's interesting for me to see the breakdown. Any other additions, Ms. Jate? And then any questions from board members?
I just want to point out that in the 3,000s, you may see in the history line when you get the multi-year and the actual spreadsheet that we have now added to it, you'll see that employee benefits has really risen, and most of it, well, not most of it, but a big chunk of it, which is about $6 million, is that on behalf of STRS, on behalf of the state. We have to book that. So when you go across on that line and you go, wow, why did our 3,000s, which are our benefits, go up so much? That's what you're going to see when we bring you the unaudited actuals, which is our year-end financials.
Questions at this point? Ms. Sims-Moten?
Not necessarily a question, but a comment. So first of all, thank you for putting this together, because it puts, when we just see the the numbers being moved, it's like, why? So if we're moving, and if we know that the 1,000 has to do with certificated salaries, then we're understanding either teachers, it's training, it's something, so we didn't have a reference point. So this is a reference point and a starting point. We'd also like to see in there, in some form of like a pie chart that tells me the percentage of the $161 million. What is that spent on? What part of that is restricted or unrestricted in terms of that, to be able to make those decisions or ask more informed questions, as opposed to going, well, I think I know what I'm asking. So I certainly appreciate this. And with regards to, I think, Carrie, you started to say, like the LCAPs, making all those references to where those funding is coming from is really crucial in terms of, again, as we're looking at the broader audit, we're looking at the broader budget, we can actually make reference to that and it makes sense. So if we were just asked in general, how much of your staff or how much of your salaries or how much of your budget goes to salaries, we could say a percentage of that is this.
85%.
So just having that right, but that. So, as the more as we learn that piece, then we should be able to say that as well. And again, I think for me, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but it just allows me to ask more informed questions and to really be able to be engaged in the conversation that you have, as opposed to be a deer in headlights going, I have no idea what you're talking about, with regards to that. So, for instance, like, I think the last report we had, and it talked about we were deficit spending, and maybe the deficit spending really had to do with we were just spending down our we're restricted. So just having those types of conversations, as opposed to some people making an assumption, particularly the public, you're saying you did this, but you're deficit spending, and really it's just that it's something that's being decreased in that area. So thank you.
I just ran the calculation. If you go ones and twos and threes, it's 131 million out of 161. I mean, that's all our personnel costs, and it is 81% of our budget. So that's just really helpful for us to walk around with. We're a people business. We're growing people, children, and so it takes a lot of high touch people to do this job.
I have a couple of, we could really geek out on this right now, right? And typically when we get the budget packet, I'll look at the beginning and I'll look at the end. In the middle is the SACS codes, where it's just a bunch of numbers that don't mean anything without the narrative that's connected with it. And so it's interesting to see it parsed out this way. I feel like I'm, kind of looking at the Dewey Decimal System. But when you're looking up there, it says resources 000 to 1999. What's in the zeros? Does that have?
So for staffing, that is like almost all of our staffing. 000, it is the most unrestricted resource you can use. And that's where most of our operating expenditures come from. But within that 000 to 1999, you have lottery, which is 1,100. You have 0790, which is the supplemental, which is your LCAP money. You have instructional materials. You have a bunch of little buckets within those resources of 000 to 1999. As you do in the resources, once you hit 2,000 to 9999, that's restricted. So you have to follow certain rules. It also has our donation accounts in it, which we have no authorization over. It's totally at the income for the sites only. But those are the 9,000 accounts where we put all the donations. So 2,000 through 8, which we don't really have any resources in 8, but goes up to about 7. Those resources are restricted. That's our CTIG grant. That's where our TIP program lives. That's where restricted lottery lives. That's where Title I, II, and III lives. So those are the most restricted funds, and those are the funds that should be used first, with their restrictions attached, obviously. But we should be spending the restricted funds on the current kids.
So I appreciate that this is a work in progress, and so just what you explained in terms of, I appreciate the question from President Parker. What's included in those resources? It's just having that further definition of what they are, and then you can associate the numbers at some point. But initially, being used like 1,000, and you just said it's lottery, it's this, it's that. So we can maybe call it a name as opposed to a number, or I don't know. So if we could even add that further into those pieces, highlighting what they are.
So on the unaudited actuals, I have given a small description of all the forms that are in the SAC software. You mentioned at the adopted budget that you wanted to understand what the forms were. So this is a smaller, with the actuals, it's a little bit smaller. There's not as many forms, so I thought this would be a good one to introduce you to this. I can also tell you what's on the unrestricted side of the budget opposed to the restricted side of the budget and the resources and things like that. I can surely give you a description of that. And then, as always, we take the estimated actuals, which is what you would have seen in the adopted budget, our best guess at how we're going to end the year, to our actuals, the way we did end the year. And we give an explanation of what those differences are. And we do discuss about supplemental and one-time funds. I think you've heard me say about the mandated money, one-time funds, and things like that. So I'll get a little bit more descriptive, so when you read through it, you understand what we're talking about.
Because I also think, as legislation is passed, like I think there's something going on about the reserve cap that's going on in school districts.
Yeah, it's been going on for a while.
Right, but I'm just saying, being new to that, so some of those things need to be relative and they need to make sense from, now if you're saying when we were last year, you definitely made those descriptions, but they didn't make sense. It didn't tie.
Sure.
So with this, it ties out and it makes sense in terms of, no, I understand, what that is. So I appreciate where we are now, and I know that we can get better at it in terms of that. And the more informed we get, then, in terms of that, we'll be able to, again, have a much more dialogue as opposed to a one-way conversation. So.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think listening to this conversation, Ms. Jate, let me ask you a sort of an explanation question. You know how in spreadsheets you can hide and unhide like columns? Well, that's almost like a totally hidden presentation. If we were to expand those resources going across, how many buckets, and this, you're going to hear us, we're not going to get into every bucket. Like if a bucket's got $100,000, please, at this level, we shouldn't talk about it. But I would say, how many buckets in the zeros to 1999 should we expand to explain detail? 5 of them, 7 of them? Same question for the restricted. I bet that's got a lot more.
Well, it's actually, we have condensed the ones on the unrestricted side. So I would say that the restricted and unrestricted are pretty close to the same amount. And I would say just off the top of my head, I mean, you can get into Civic Center and all of those. So, because we like to keep our money in tidy little buckets. So I would say probably maybe 8 or 9, maybe 10 on the unrestricted and probably about 7 on the restricted side.
All right, so here's what I think I'm going to work with Ms. Jate on is we'll take just that 1,000 line to start with that certificated, and then we'll figure out the right amount of buckets. And here's the way my brain works. Okay, what are the top 5 or top 7? And all the other little ones, I'm going to put it in one bucket called Other. All right, and we got to focus on the bigger buckets. And the other, we'll probably make a list, but I want you to keep in mind that list is just so that you know what's there, but let's not open that bucket. And we need to focus on the bigger ones. And I think if we get that expanded out, I think that's a good first cut. And then I see us doing that with, even the 2,000s, 3,000s. It's just, this is really a 2-dimensional picture that we've compressed into one page. So this is a picture of a 1-year budget. The other thing that you have to get used to, and we have to figure out how to best communicate that, is the narrative of how budgets move, how budgets change. And that's harder to communicate because that's like a 2-dimensional grid that becomes a movie. And it's moving. And so, I've watched CBOs try to communicate that. The best we can do is before and after. It's here's a picture, and here's the new picture. But what's more interesting is when you put about 6 or 7 of those together over 2 years, once you get used to this, you start to see the trends. And I'm only here about 13 months, so I'm still forming my picture. But we're trying to help you form that picture, and really, how do we create that movie so that you understand it and that you trust the story? Okay, make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
we do try to tell you the story of why it changed from one time to another, because you need to know that, and that's what we go from. Here's the last time you saw it, so here's the new budget. So I just want to make sure I understand. I understand how you want to see this now. My only request is that can I do it off cycle, budget cycle? Because, meaning, I'm not sure I can get this done and finish all the supplemental stuff that I have to do for the unaudited actuals, write up the narrative. So I'm hoping that maybe I can do this in preparation for the adopted budget. The first interim budget. Before that, so you get the information, and then when you get the budget, you can actually read it and understand it. Not actually read it, I'm sure you read it, but to actually understand it. Is that okay?
Makes sense to me. I can appreciate that.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for us. And I just think this is really enlightening. It just totally sheds a whole new light on everything for me. So I think with this and with what you're planning with the discussion of the buckets, and then when it fits into your schedule, because I know you have a lot on your plate, I think that's going to be very helpful in this process of really taking up the understanding of this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are now at item F4. This is discussion of board policies in the personnel series, the 4000s. This is Mr. Chirina. We have about 19 board policies to take a look at, and we will not be reading them line for line, obviously.
Great.
But I think that what we'll do is open each one. Just let us know if there was anything that you caught that needs to change, or anything that you have questions about. And some of them are simple deletions, although deletion is never simple, right? Because what is it taking away? Mr. Trina.
Thank you, President Parker, board members, Mr. Matsuoka, and Cabinet. Before you is a long list of board policies in regards to the Human Resource and Personnel Department. Just as a preface before we go into them, most of these are in action now. We really, when new laws come out, we start acting upon that new law. We don't wait for the board policy. So really, this is codifying current practice that is in place, and just getting our board policies up to speed in regards to how we are doing our practice and personnel. So the recommendation is for us to review this, and we will take direction from the board as to any changes in language, or I'll answer any questions that you might have about our protocols and procedures.
Great. First up is Board Policy 4030. This is non-discrimination in employment. Taking a look through, and Mr. Trina, actually, it would also be helpful to know, do any of these have local language, or are all of these CSBA boilerplate?
These were taken from CSB boilerplate. I know that we are shifting soon to when we bring our board policies, other board policies in the future, that we were looking more towards a local language that specifically hits our district.
Okay. All right, so in this first one, anything in the language changes that you noticed? Any questions about the content? This is the one where it specifically calls out harassment in the workplace. It calls out retaliation. No questions on that one? Dr. Reed?
I just have a question. So the changes made by CSBA with regards, can you hear me?
Yeah.
With regards to these policies, were they made because of legal action that had taken place?
Yes, a lot of the changes that CSB puts in is a reflection of new law that may have been passed by legislation.
Okay, and so this is just reflecting that to be really honed towards those
Yes, to those
issues.
changes.
Okay.
Okay, if there are no changes to 4030, then we will see these, see that one in the future. Then there's 4111, recruitment and selection. This is about having an open and fair recruitment process, job descriptions, how to run job interviews. Any questions, any wording changes on that one? I didn't see anything. Great. 4112.2, certification. And this is about essentially what we require with the CTC for our credentialed staff.
Yeah, it's following the guidelines from CTC in regards how we hire for certain content areas.
Nothing on that one? Okay. I want to note, because you might not necessarily think about it, but this is one that talks about parental notifications also at the beginning of the year, where we are required to talk to parents if there's a problem hiring into a position. And so you might not necessarily think to look in this BP because, but it's a parent right is over in this one. Then there's BP 4112.21. This is interns. And
we had some information brought regarding some of the partnerships that we have. I think that was brought 2 board meetings ago. So this is describing how that partnership should work with higher educational institutions that have an intern program that we may hire their interns to do our work.
any questions on that one or comments? I'm like madly closing these and opening new ones. Okay, so the next one up is one that we are to delete. A major reason being the term "No Child Left Behind."
No longer.
I think we have a lot of board policies that we need to update on that outside this series as well. Okay, so this one will go away since NCLB doesn't exist anymore. I assume there are no questions on this one. Okay, and then BP 4113, assignment. So this is about where certificated personnel can be placed in to teach.
According to the credential.
According to the credential, yep. Were there any wording changes on that one? Okay. That brings us to 4115, evaluation supervision. Dr. Reed?
Yeah, if you could explain, and maybe this isn't the place, but in terms of your evaluative process for your teachers, because it says here, the governing board believes that regular comprehensive evaluations designed to hold instructional staff accountable for their performance are key to improving their teaching skills and raising students and levels of achievement. And what you're taking out is actually the idea of the instructional staff support in improving these skills, which is in the top part that's been crossed out. So these evaluations are taking place, but what sort of, so why was that taken out? What sort of support is being provided to ensure that the teachers are able to do the work necessary to raise student levels of achievement?
So, Dr. Reed, clarify for me which area in the first paragraph that's being crossed out?
It's the first paragraph.
Right.
It's all cut out. It just says, the section that was cut out says, the governing board believes that regular and comprehensive evaluations can help instructional staff improve their teaching skills and raise student levels of achievement. Evaluations also serve to hold staff accountable for their performance. And it says the superintendent or designee shall evaluate the performance of certified staff members in accordance with law, negotiated employee contracts, and board adopted evaluation standards. So, and this comprehensive, so what I'm saying is, what are they doing? What are we doing to support the teachers? We have that, we're looking at it, we're holding them accountable, but what specifically are we doing to evaluate the teachers and provide support for them?
if you look at the green section right underneath, as I read the red that's crossed out, the green is essentially a more concise version of the red, and then the superintendent or designee sentence, it actually is, they moved it towards the bottom of the page.
Oh, okay.
So my sense is CSBA just, they kind of rewrote it. They didn't lose any of the intent of that
Okay.
first
I was just
paragraph.
concerned because when it took that out, it's like, well, wait, what are we doing about it?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think you have to look at all of these policy recommendations, is if anytime there's a cross out, is to look right after to see the new green section. Sometimes there's just cross out because it's that part of ed code or law change or went away. I think a lot of CSBA's work is it's just changing wording, tightening it, shortening it, sometimes making it longer.
Thank you.
All right, that moves us to BP 4117.3. This is personnel reduction. And one, I'm just looking to see if the dates,
Oh, when we are able to do that if we have decline in enrollment? That date?
I'm interested in number 5 in particular because it's interesting to have the 5 days and the August 15th. How that's come in is something new. Oh, man, it's not fun when we get to this type of stuff, though.
No.
Any wording changes on this one? No? All right, let's keep moving.
I'm just going to make a note for staff we should check on when this revision came to us, because even the words revenue limit,
Right.
that language is kind of faded away, and now it's LCFF
Yeah.
revenue. So it makes me wonder, because that August 15th thing, that just reminds me of the years when the state legislature, they just wouldn't pass a budget until after we opened school. And so this feels a little dated.
It's 2014 is when it was.
Yeah, 2014. So we should maybe double check this one against the most recent CSBA version. Okay. That just feels a touch old. Yep.
Okay, next up is BP 4118, dismissal, suspension, and disciplinary action for certificated personnel. Any questions on this one?
I just had a question because it's specifically calling out, I'm assuming maybe down further, it also talks about classified as well, or we just
No, this is specifically for certificate.
Yeah.
certificate? Okay, just want to make sure.
Classified
Yeah.
has a different process.
Okay.
Classified 4200s or 40?
The next one, 4200.
So anything in the 4100 is going to be certificated. Okay, no, the wording, I didn't catch any typos or anything, so that's good. This brings us to 4119.11, sexual harassment, first reading. And it's short and been some small changes here, really tied in with the previous one that did address job applicants. This
Yes.
one takes it out, but it's addressed, that job applicants are addressed, one of the earlier ones that there were changes to. Any questions on this one? Ms. Capps?
Yeah, in my context, and again, this, similar to Dr. Reed, maybe this isn't the time I'm fine with the changes. So, but just the lens by which I read this is just with so many recent academic institutions who have not acted. To me, this point number 4 seems weak. If you can scroll down, it just allows the superintendent to take timely and appropriate correct, but it doesn't say sort of must take. And again, I'm speaking from just my alma mater, UC Berkeley, has had a very checkered record lately, and all of the consistency was all about the administration not acting and sort of leaning too heavily on the confidentiality that's required for these situations, but not enough on the need to act. And this just seems very passive, this point number 4, that the superintendent can take timely and appropriate corrective, but not sort of must, or, anyway, just a flag from me. I don't know, again, if this is something that we take on in a different
No,
forum.
now is the right time. So it does say shall above, but maybe this is one where if you want to take some time to think about what might make that feel stronger. Yeah, this is a first reading, so we're not taking action tonight. And that's one that we could call out to maybe make some changes to that. You know, you'll notice, I don't know if it's the whole thing, which may require interim separation of the complainant and the alleged harasser.
But if you read it, it's really the superintendent or designee shall take timely and appropriate corrective remedial action. So there's that actually allows for the superintendent to not act.
Under a complaint process, there is specific guidelines of time which we have to investigate and answer to a complaint, sexual harassment or otherwise.
Okay.
So
It's just not listed here?
It's
It's not listed here. I can bring that to you.
So this is the first reading. Could that be part of?
But
what's
it's
the
a different
procedural-
aspect. This is specifically talking about sexual harassment.
Yeah.
There is a complaining process for anybody who has a complaint, whether it's a harassment or sexual harassment, that there's a timeline by which once that complaint is made, we have to respond to that complaint in regards to our process of investigation. So it's a very specific timeline. I can get that to you between now and the next board meeting if you'd like.
Yeah, I guess that's, otherwise, and yeah, I can take some time to think of how this policy potentially, just that wording could be.
It doesn't allow us to be leisurely and say, well, we'll get to it when we think it's important. There really is specific days by which we have to answer to a complainant.
Okay.
But I can
Maybe
get
it
that.
should reference that, or
Okay.
reference that time frame in accordance with the time frame. Something that right now, again, I think one could read this, that there is potential for the superintendent or the designee to not act, or to act in a much inappropriately long time.
Right. Or not at all.
Not at all. Right.
I also would look at making some changes to a couple of the paragraphs below there, where it says, any district employee who feels that he or she has been sexually harassed or who has knowledge of any incident of sexual harassment by or against another employee shall immediately report this incident to his or her supervisor, the principal, district administrator, or superintendent. I really feel like that we should have it in here that HR always gets this directly from this, so that they can report to the supervisor, but they also need to copy in HR, that no matter who, I mean, it does then say a supervisor, principal, or other district manager receives a complaint shall promptly notify the superintendent, but it needs to go to HR.
Okay.
And I think it needs to go to HR regardless. Even if you've given it to your supervisor, it needs to go to HR.
So can we add the HR piece on that second?
I would add,
sentence?
yeah, to his supervisor, principal, district manager, or superintendent, and to the Human Resources Department. And I don't know if you want to designate, if it would be Ms. Peak that gets it, an initial.
It would be me.
It would be you, then the assistant superintendent for HR.
Okay.
And then that makes the next line almost superfluous. Because it's going to go to you, to your office automatically. But I'm just thinking about the actuality of it. Like if somebody's in the middle of it and
Right.
they're not going to go look at our board policy. But we should be able to train our administrators to know that that person, that it's not just coming from them to HR, but there should be a discussion at that point, that employee has the right and should talk directly to HR themselves also. So I'm just kind of, I would put that on, this particular one, 4119.11, let's put that on
Second reading.
action for the next time, so that we actually have a chance to look at it in depth and not just consent. The other ones, I would say consent.
Okay.
But this one in particular, let's take a closer look at it.
I'm just listening and thinking out loud that if the policy says that you must also report it to HR, and the word must, I wonder if that would discourage people from starting the sort of the reporting complaint process. Because, you know, the minute you involve the assistant sup of HR, it makes it a big deal. I appreciate the intent. I think we know that in this space, sometimes it's hard for people to come forward and to start to voice their complaints. And I think if it said must versus should. Or may, or I think we could encourage it, but I don't know, this could play out opposite of what you're trying to encourage is, you know, people coming forward, but if they have to inform HR, it might put a damper on it. And I see our SBTA president in the back. I would say we should bring this back, but I think this whole space of sexual harassment, it's a big deal in our culture. I mean, we just had a conversation today in our cabinet about how do we deal with this in an organization. So I really appreciate the comments about we should never be an organization that looks the other way. You know, and we should be timely. I just want to create, how do we create an atmosphere where people feel supported to bring their complaints to a process? So
Okay. Well,
let's bring it back, and then this one may take a couple cycles. I think I want us, you know, have some cabinet review of this policy, and I think I would like to talk with our union leadership about this.
Okay. Next up is 4139, peer assistance in review. This is a deletion, and what is it being replaced with?
It's being replaced with the teacher support program. We actually approved that, I think, last winter in with our teacher induction.
Great. And then 4140, bargaining units. And essentially the stuff that's crossed out is rewritten and included at the end. Any questions about this one? No. Yep, pretty straightforward. 4143, negotiations consultation. Again, just clarifying language around what a bargaining team, what their roles and responsibilities are. Okay, with no changes to that one. 4151, employee compensation. So one question I had on this, there's new language on employees shall be classified on the salary schedule on the basis of uniform allowance for years of training and years of experience, unless the board and employee organization negotiate and mutually agree to a salary schedule based on different criteria. Well, essentially, I mean, I look at that and, you know, for employees that have been in our district for a long time or started their careers in our district, it's pretty straightforward where they're going to be on the salary schedule.
Step schedule, yes.
One question I have is for employees that come in from other districts. I don't know how that is if that is completely uniform in terms of credit, years of service credit.
Currently, we are offering just the max of 7 years, so we'd bring them in at step 8. We have agreed with our union leadership in regards to some of those hard-to-fill positions.
Is that ever a question mark? I mean, because we could have somebody that has 15 years of experience that would never come here then if we're only offering them 8 years.
It becomes more of a question mark as our teacher shortage really starts to impact us. because of the economy and the cost of living in Santa Barbara, those who are probably 10-plus years, who may want to come here, usually will not if all we're offering is the 7 years credit. So that is something that we can think about in the future.
I guess it's a question mark for me, because if somebody's really good, I mean, and they happen to have 15 years of experience and we need them to fill a position, why would we not offer them the same amount that somebody that's been here for 15 years and is at the same experience level? I mean, obviously it's more expensive, but if they're great teachers, that it's, I don't know. I guess that's a contractual question mark to me. About why that
Why we
exists.
limit?
Yeah. So, but it doesn't necessarily change anything in here. It is, because that's not listed in here. So, any other comments on this particular one?
Well, is it listed somewhere else?
Is it in the
Contract.
contract? So it's in the
Okay.
union contract.
But I can ask that question. Maybe that's something that we move to our negotiation piece as we
Yeah.
come up this year.
I don't know why it would be, why, I don't know why.
Right.
Why is that? Why would you not want experienced teachers to come into your district?
Right.
Okay. That brings us to 4154, Health and Welfare Benefits, the first reading. And let's see, there's some slight wording changes in the beginning, and then some more specific language that looks like it's related to the Affordable Care Act in particular. Any questions around the wording on this? Nope. All right, let's keep moving. That brings us to 4157, work-related injuries. This is one that we're deleting. And what is this being replaced with, Mr. Trina?
I do not have that
Yeah. that's
replacement. I think it may be, I'll look what it's being replaced with. I think we've already approved it, though.
Okay. I would be curious to know.
Okay.
And then 4158, employee security. I'll just note that here, if there's a threat of violence, then they're notifying the superintendent or designee immediately.
Mhm.
You know, I think in some ways it gets down to any of these where there's a challenge. When it says something like notify the superintendent or notify your supervisor, in some ways I think without there being I don't know if there's a form. Is there like, if you walk into your school office and say, I've had a parent threaten me or I've had a coworker threaten me, does everybody just automatically know what to do next? Is there a step-by-step, like, this is who gets notified, this is the wording that you need, there's a form that needs to be turned in, and just anything that would makes it uniform and
A
simple.
procedure by which when complaints come in, they're
because
served up to.
I would feel like, okay, does this mean that I'm supposed to email Mr. Matsuoka, see Matsuoka, SP, and just say, it just feels a little, vague, yeah. So that's a question mark for all of these ones that require some reporting to start getting the HR to move on it. That's a question mark for me.
You know, the safest answer to that is the superintendent's office, because, I mean, we really have 4 people that can receive communication. That's a broader, safer statement. So, I mean, I'm not always accessible, whereas Sandra, Carol, and to some degree Lauren are always accessible with HR as a backup. I mean, I think that's what we've guided our principals. If something's going on, no matter what, call my office, because then if I'm not around, then we have multiple designees. So I think if we were to look at a sort of a global communication step, if there's any moment of medium to major crisis, that you call the superintendent's office, and that will mobilize our team.
Cabinet.
Yeah, it really mobilizes cabinet.
And maybe this really speaks to, like, we can wordsmith on the board policies, but it's really not about the board policies because staff never look at these.
Yeah.
And so it's about what our communications people put together for what, if there's a challenge in the workplace, there's a flow chart of who gets notified and what their contact info is. I think that could be really helpful to staff. So thinking about that. Dr. Reed?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good thing for us to look at. And what is the procedure process?
Ms. Parker makes a good point. People aren't going to look at policy, and I think the policy is fine. What we need to get a lot more clear on, it's really our crisis management steps. And, we've actually got some good procedures in place, but we just need to kind of practice that stuff. And it's just like, that's why we do fire drills, we do earthquake drills. Most of our principals have been, spot on with, they know what to do, but it's always good for us to reinforce it. So.
Do our employees, I don't know if it's all on the intranet or if they get a physical handbook that talks about.
There's an employee handbook online.
Yeah, so something like having that kind of a flow chart and contact information as part of the employee handbook, I think could be really good. Okay, that brings us to 4315.1. This is a deletion of staff evaluating teachers. And so we've bumped up, as you can see, once we get to the 43s, we're in the management and confidential personnel section. And this is a complete deletion. And again, I'll be curious to know the cross-reference to what it's been replaced with.
Okay.
And then 4331, staff development. And this is for administrative and supervisory personnel. And so there's some additions, lots of additions actually, into topics of professional development that have been expanded, or actually really just clarified out because they were not listed before. Any questions on the wording in here?
I don't have a question on that. I was just trying to reconcile where it says like CF. Is that a reference to that? Like,
yes.
Okay.
It's essentially means cross-reference.
Okay.
But it's looking at like those ones, the ones that are CF, and they start with the.
It's a reference to another
Different board policy.
Yeah, so I'm just taking a look at, so they just have the board policy listed, the name of it listed next to it. Sometimes, I'm looking through this particular one, sometimes they'll refer to either Ed Code or to, California law in general, codes and regulations. But these ones are all cross-references just to board policies. All right, so that brings us to the end. We've given some work for staff, and I think with the board's permission, I think all of them can come back on consent except for 4119.11, and we'll take another pass at that one. Okay? Great.
oh, just one more question. So will the ones that were deleted, will you also then tell us what was replaced with?
That was 4315.1 and 4139, peer assistance review. What's being replaced?
And 4157.1.
Yeah.
No, it was the ones at the bottom.
Replacing the deleted.
I just made a global note that any policy that's being deleted, we should either have a link to the replacement policy or the rationale why that policy was deleted. Yeah, that's pretty easy. So comments, that wasn't bad. I mean, 30 minutes to get through a chunk of policies. Just know that there's a long list waiting in the queue to come before the board. Let me comment about a change in strategy based on what I've learned about our district capacity and where we're going to use CSBA and where we're not going to use CSBA. So CSBA is probably the best resources for all the updates. Legal, ed code, I mean, that's what they do. I mean, it's California School Board, so they're about policy. But the Gamut website, I think I've mentioned that in Friday letters and maybe here. When I now understand our district website capacity, we have Linda Batterman, who is like a keeper of our policies. Like when I learned what she's done, we're going to actually move this work in-house. We'll get the updates from CSBA, but we're going to manage it in-house because the CSBA Gamut website, in theory, it's a good idea, but they are hosting like 500 plus school districts' policies. And so when you go there, it is so slow.
Well, the crazy thing is that our public and the board in general, really not even aware of Gamut. We only use the local access to it. I mean, I only go to Gamut when I need to look at what other districts are doing, and that can be super helpful. But most people don't, and the public, we provide no public link because we do everything. And so I think it's kind of ridiculous that we've been doing this, like having it in both places when nobody here is using it in that way. So good.
So we're going to host it on our website because it's currently hosted. We just need to get the updates. And so when we go to CSBA in December, don't go to a workshop on online Gamut. Because we don't need to use that tool. We've got our own system.
All right, we are on G and moving back to the consent agenda. We had item D6 that was pulled. This is the approval of memorandum of understanding between the Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse, commonly known as CADA, and Fighting Back, and the Youth Services Specialists in Santa Barbara Unified School District. Dr. Wagenek, you're our resource on that, and Ms. Sims-Moten, you had a question.
Yes, I just was wondering, because there's just 2 invoices, and I looked at, do we get a report or a progress report in between the first invoice and the second before we disperse the second invoice? That's the first question. And the second one is there some evaluative point in terms of what the services that we're paying for, what is the outcome that we're looking for, and when will we know, is it a year out, is it 6 months out, just ask that question.
The answer to your first question is no, we don't do a progress report before the second amount is dispersed, though I certainly can bring you information at that time if that's helpful, but no, not per the MOU. The second piece is, and I brought this to you in the spring, I can give you a progress report on my progress, which is we gathered data on super and the efficacy of super over the last 3 years. We're making sense of that data right now, and I'll have that to you sometime in the next 2 months.
Yeah.
At a board meeting, probably late October, time-wise.
Yeah, I was just thinking that's a large amount of money in terms of that. At least we could have a progress report. How did things go in that first, since that first invoice? And if there's changes need to be made, then, that's the accountability part with regards to the agency that's providing that services. That is just an accountability piece.
Right, and I agree, and we are evaluating. This is the year that we're doing the evaluation of those services, so you'll hear a lot in that area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Paredes Ulloa?
Sorry. So as part of the evaluation piece, I mentioned in a previous meeting about just kind of looking at the in-kind contributions from the Santa Barbara Unified School District. Is that going to be part of your evaluation as well, just to kind of see what kind of bang we're getting for our buck, whether it's space or anything else?
I think we can definitely report on that, and the in-kind is fairly adequately spelled out in the MOU. We provide phones and office space and so forth, and that was actually something that I brought up with Mr. Stonefeld in the spring when we talked, is that we do provide, I would say 6 figures in terms of in-kind once we get into supervision provided by administrators, space, phones, et cetera. So We'll include that in the evaluation.
With a number, not just a listing of the items, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Great. All right. I need to have a motion to approve this MOU.
I make a motion that the Board of Education approve the memorandum of understanding between the Council of Alcohol and Drug Abuse and Fighting Back and the Santa Barbara Unified District for 2017-18 school year.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Next up, coming events. We just had the huge one, right? School starting. And then back to school nights are kicking in pretty fast. Are those running on the homepage of the website at this point?
Yeah, the back to school nights are on our homepage of our website. Okay. And on our homepage of our website, we've also had a couple radio interviews with Radio Bronco about the back to school nights. So Dr. Ramirez and Dr. Mora were on Radio Bronco yesterday.
Awesome.
And the News Hawk contacted us as well as about our back to school night. So they interviewed Dr. Jacqueline Mora as well on that. And so we have a flyer. We've communicated on e-news in a variety of different places about just the general meetings, and the schools themselves are doing their own outreach. And so Dr. Ramirez can speak to what Jacqueline Mora has put together. She has these great packages for the schools about back to school nights.
Dr. Ramirez?
Yes, so Dr. Mora has been communicating with our sites to help them with their outreach. This begins this week, actually. We wanted to ensure that schools didn't go into October or avoided going into mid-October. And in addition to that, we wanted to, we've been going through a very iterative process the last few years to ensure that we minimize conflicts, as we know that our parents are in have children in multiple schools. Also, leading with equity and language access, we wanted to ensure that as we were recruiting and moving to an adult interpreter model, that we allow for more opportunities for us to recruit and really be able to elicit the support of bilingual, biliterate employees and members of our community who have supported us in this regard.
All right, Mr. Paredes Ulloa, did you want to comment on this in particular?
Sorry. Any chance we could get access to the interview that Dr. Ramirez and Dr. Mora did, or put on a website or something? One, I'd just love to hear it too, but I think it'd be kind of cool for our families to hear, especially, in Spanish, not having that much material, multimedia material online to really get them to come in. It'd be nice little, I don't know, maybe add on to the website. Just a thought.
If you can get a link, I don't know if they have it in a recording that they can get it. Yeah. So noting that it looks like our very first two schools are this week, with Washington on Thursday night and Franklin on Friday night, having been to most of these last year. And as a parent, it used to be that I was like, I'm going to my kids' back to school nights, and I know I'm also a school board member, but, isn't that enough? They're great, and it's a great opportunity for board members just to pop in, and I hope it would be okay with principals if, typically there's somebody from the district there, that we just get tagged along and spend, get to hear their opening before they send parents off. So any of these that you can pop to, I highly recommend it. Really, really great way to get to know the way a school works, and for some of our new principals to see them in action. Okay. Any other coming events that we should be thinking about?
We have the big Peabody groundbreaking.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Maybe.
Tomorrow. And it conflicts with something important at work for me, so unfortunately I will not be there, but I will be cheering all the rest of you on. I'm excited to have that get going. And anything else? No? Great. Next on our agenda is future agenda items. You did get a list from me, and I had a couple of emails that I'm sorry I hadn't had the chance to respond to, but I will respond to shortly. And these are the ones where there was like a formal request. A lot of times we say things like, wouldn't it be good to get, and that's very different from like, I'm requesting a future agenda item. And so I want you to know, because I was looking at it going, well, we said we wanted to hear about this or that, but it wasn't in that kind of a setting. It was part of like a board item where we said it would be interesting to have more. And I don't always capture those. So if you see things that are missing, please email me or tell me now. Anything right now? All right. I will get back to those emails, and we'll keep moving forward with that. And I think it would be good, though, to actually have, it was helpful. We have a couple of outside speakers that are coming, and we know that they're coming. But it'd be helpful for the other ones that are kind of floating there, because I had already culled the list from the previous board, which is like, oh, there were things from 2 or 3 years ago that actually really never came forward as a future, as an agenda item. So I think it'd be good to add another column where there's an estimated time that it's going to come back, because otherwise they could float out there too long. Okay, that brings us to our next meeting, which is Tuesday, September 12th. And Dr. Reed, that's the one that you will not be here for.
I will not be here for that.
Thank you. I mean, you ran the last meeting when I wasn't here, so I, it's your turn. Anybody else absent for 12th to the 26th? Great. Okay. And then if there is no objection from my fellow board members, we will hold for a moment and listen to what else Mr. Matsuoka has to say.
Just want to check, so in the Friday letter, I put out the idea of these study sessions back to back, and so is it okay to start those at 4:30 at the next board meeting, and then the one right after on the 26th? So both September meetings, 4:30 p.m.? Is that?
Hold. Hold. I'm
check your
looking at my
calendars. And you'll be out of town on the 12th.
Yeah, both of those work for me.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, we'll start planning. We usually don't videotape the board study session, because we usually do it because we want it to be more of a interactive, so.
Would you like us to record it? I mean, just audio record it?
Yeah, we could audio record it.
Yeah, that'd be easy.
Yeah, we could do that.
We can have a little study session podcast. You can do it while you're out.
President Parker, could I add one thing before we
Yeah.
close? Because I'm going to feel real guilty. I didn't thank Brian Rouse for all the work that he's put in, putting everything together, helping us get the iPads out. So I don't want to be that person who gave a speech and then forgot my significant other. So I want to thank Brian. Yeah.
Thank you, Brian.
Reiterate that, because Brian has been helpful on so many fronts, literally just turning on my iPad. So I really appreciate all the support you've given.
Okay, now we will adjourn the meeting.